In this video, I'll talk about different ways that phylogenetic trees can be drawn and show many examples of different orientations and styles and artistic touches, and discuss how none of them really matter. In a subsequent video, I'll talk about important differences, but in this video, we'll talk about different ways that trees can be presented and how it really doesn't change what the trees are telling us. So there's many different variants of trees that you will see. Trees that are presented in scientific publications are usually of this form. They look the most tree-like, and they have branches that are either vertical or horizontal, but they run straight. A common format in books, especially textbooks, it's also a very easy one to draw quickly when you're doing homework, is this kind of diagonal style or ladder style. Other formats are also preferred. This kind of rounded off, you'll often see in books and magazines, with the edges rounded off. This kind of format down here, this is often a very compact form. It's become very common in phylogenetics, and with DNA sequencing, where often we have a lot of information, many species are being covered, and they need a more compact representation. But all these trees, if you look carefully, all of these all have the exact same order: A, B, F, C, E, D, A, B, F, C, E, D, A, B, F, C, E, D, and so forth. Even this one, if you look carefully, the order of branching and the pattern of branching is exactly the same. All the trees are identical, even though have the identical information, even though they have superficial artistic differences. Trees can be drawn in any direction. So they can be pointing up, they can be pointing left, they can be pointing down, they can be pointing right. This is probably the most common orientation in scientific publications. Left to right, with the root on the left, the tips on the right. Other formats can occur, especially in books and textbooks and magazine articles, often for artistic reasons or just fitting them onto the particular layout of the page. So direction does not matter, up, down, left, right. It does not matter to any of the information content on this slide here. All of the trees are exactly the same. One thing you can think about is, what is the Newick notation for these trees? All these trees are identical. What is the Newick notation? How would we write this out in that compact notation that I spoke about in a previous? So there it is. We can see that D and E are a clade. They get grouped together. C and F are a clade. B and A over there. It's a fairly complex tree to write out in Newick, so if you didn't get it your first try, don't worry, try it again. So the lengths of line, depending on the tree, the lengths of the lines often don't matter. They never matter. When you have this style of tree, the length of the branches don't matter at all. In a later video, I'll talk about when the lengths of the branches matter, but they're only in particular kinds of trees, and it has to be marked explicitly what they mean. So sometimes it's hidden a little bit, so you got to learn the tricks. But in this case, the lengths of these lines don't mean anything. So this line doesn't imply more or less evolutionary change than this line there. There's nothing informative about the lengths of those lines. What's always important is the relationship. So the fact that A and B are close together, that C is the next, A, B, and C form the next clade. A and B are sister species. A and B are the sister group to C, and so forth. That relationship is what matters. And the clade structure is what matters. One important thing to always remember, that trees do not imply any sort of advancement or progress. Now, often we have a habit of putting humans or other species that we're particularly interested in, we have a habit of putting them on the edge. So we see this long line here with other species, in this case fish and frogs and a goose, branching off, and we end here with us. So this could unfortunately be interpreted as these being less advanced species, and then finally arriving at the more advanced human, but that is not what is implied. The only thing that they show are relationships. So we'll talk about this more in another video, but we can take humans and we can put them into a different place by rotating around our node here, and we can move them into the middle, and we can put them right next to sharks. That doesn't mean that humans are now closely related to sharks. It doesn't mean that they are less advanced. It just has to do with the fact that we can rotate around this node. We haven't changed the fact that humans and frogs are in a clade here. I got rid of geese in this example here. Humans and frogs are part of a clade. Oh, I'm sorry. These trees are a little bit different than each other. I edited them. But you can get the overall point. One thing that's important to know is we can put any collection of species on a tree. So this tree is kind of interesting. We've taken humans, and then we put them with a bunch of sea organisms, including various echinoderms, or rather they're all echinoderms, sea stars, sea cucumbers, sea urchins. We can put any collection of species on the tree. And in this case, actually, humans are the first to branch off, and on up here, this would imply that the sea urchin is the most advanced species if we were using that logic. That's not true. All that this tree is telling us is how that these species are related to each other. So sea urchins and sea cucumbers are in a clade. They are sister groups. Sea stars and this other, I think it's brittle stars, are related to each other. And they're all part of a larger clade of echinoderms. And then they, somewhere deep in the past, they share in a common ancestor with humans and all animals. In this case, we're just including humans as an outgroup, as a comparison group. One thing that's also important to remember is that a long line doesn't imply stasis. It doesn't mean that humans evolved sometimes in the past and then remain constant. And when you put it on a tree like this, it seems obviously that when we're talking about the common ancestor between humans and echinoderms, that's very far in the past. Lots of change has occurred since then. So all of these organisms are invertebrate. So along this line down here, this branch of the past, there were invertebrates at this time point, and then they evolved into something fish-like, and then tetrapod on land became something rodent-like, and then primate, and then finally ape-like and human. All of that change is implied as occurring sometime along this branch. So long straight lines do not indicate that nothing was happening. Usually we put species that are still alive or extant, species that are still living, on the tips. These species are, we can think of sister species, we can think of cousin species. They are not each other's ancestors. We are not descended from chimpanzees. We are not related to chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are our siblings. Chimpanzees did not descend or evolve from gorillas. They are the cousins of gorillas. These are all living species. They are not, nobody is the ancestor of another species on this tree. The ancestors are indicated by the nodes. They occur sometime in the past, and they are extinct. Again, it cannot be emphasized enough. Humans did not descend from monkeys. Humans did not evolve from monkeys. We share a common ancestor deep in the past with monkeys. Sometimes in the past there was some kind of primate. Populations diverged, developed into different species. One of those lineages developed into monkeys. Another lineage diversified into other organisms. Humans also likewise did not descend from chimps. Sometimes in the past, we shared a common ancestor, some sort of ape, perhaps chimpanzee-like ancestor, but it was not a chimpanzee. We are not descended from modern chimpanzees. Understanding trees and all their variants and nuances can be difficult. So here are some papers, many of which are the ones where I got the figures for this talk. You can check these out for further information. Understanding Evolutionary Trees by Gregory and the Tree Thinking Challenge by Baum et al. Are highly recommended.